Are we going to go into it a little bit more?
We can, yeah.
I'll just say that the mass blast idea started when, everybody's trying to build muscle as fast as possible or lose fat as fast as possible, and there's an element of how healthy you want it to be because sometimes fast isn't always healthy. But for me, it was more like my body was so extremely high maintenance that if I didn't train and diet, I would lose all my muscle. Steroids did a lot to help me look better all the time, despite not living the bodybuilding lifestyle. But when I met Coach Trevor and I saw this massive amount of permanent mutated muscle that he barely has to do anything to maintain, I started studying what is it that he does and how could I do it healthier. So I took Coach Trevor's principles of how he built his permanent muscle and I combined with it like the healthiest way to approach it, and actually ended up with the mass blast. Because the unhealthy way to approach it would be to do a 2-month mass blast, which is what bodybuilders do.
So this is the problem. So maybe you don't know some of the issues here. But this is the key element you guys can see that makes me able to work with Tony and like him as a friend, is that I have never caught him in a lie. I genuinely don't believe he lies. So if you don't lie, and even if you're saying things potentially, that's what I said about Paul Saladino, also the carnivore MD. Even if he's making mistakes, if he's not intentionally lying or commercially driven, lying to get commercial aims, my response wouldn't be so harsh. But the lying, and same with Liver King, lying for the commercial aims, in his case less obvious because he might like the image and notoriety. But Paul Saladino barely gets notoriety from him, just gets financial returns and co-signed it. The lying is the element. But you see what Tony said here, these are the two fundamental problems with the mass blast. The first one is it's actually been surprisingly indicated in the academic literature, not tested, but indicated, that bodybuilders are likely losing more integrity in their heart due to the effects of water retention on the heart, changing the heart structure rapidly. Rapid changes cause fibrotic developments and damage to the muscle fibers that the longer term also causes, but to a lesser degree. The problem is, in the longer term, you get the senescent cells, the more protein eating over a longer time, like some bodybuilding coaches, like Chad Nichols and Milo Sarshev, and Hani, I think, some of the most successful ones recommend protein amounts that you were shocked by. I told you recently. He was floored by the number that it's sometimes 500, 600 milligrams for higher protein. People with the same, well, they have enlarged kidneys, but the same kidney. So it's still dealing with that. The issue then becomes time. Because the kidney doesn't have to change shape necessarily to deal with the nitrogenous waste, but the heart does change shape quickly with edema. And that's why edema is very dangerous. Edema is water retention around the heart. And, growth hormone, I think I was the first person to show this online though, is the increase is particularly extracellular water. That's what it's increasing, and that's what's causing this edema. So extracellular in the heart is causing structural changes physically, due to physically causing tension in the heart for beating with a higher size and all that kind of stuff. So quick changes are bad. This is the biggest thing wrong with cycling, is because cycling in general, you're going through changes, but usually that's with androgenic steroids. The growth hormone changes at high doses are much bigger. I know this because I've taken, for short periods like him, like up to 15 units of pharmaceutical growth hormone a day, which is very expensive, obviously, but I've tried this and seen to the point where there was like minor heart failure. I could tell there was minor heart failure because breathing was very deep, out of breath during speech. This is some kind of heart failure in the moment, acute, may not be long term. So that's one concern. Now, I genuinely think maybe you didn't know about this.
Well, we mitigate that with telmisartan, nebivolol, diuretics.
Diuretics. So you do use diuretics, and diuretics can mitigate that. You can protect against the damage of the tension on the heart and the structural changes with telmisartan, because you'll have to put less pressure into the blood vessels, but also it causes reduction in inflammation in the blood vessels. Nebivolol increases nitric oxide in the blood vessels and also slows the heart rate, so it adapts less to these extreme. And it also you may have like hypercardia, sometimes not tachycardia, because of this sudden change in fluid retention. Another portion that's important is ARBs. ARBs, which we're using, increase potassium levels. So you don't want to be supplementing potassium, which a lot of people do in their pre-workouts and other places in particular. I've never had high potassium levels, but there are polymorphisms that affect that, and I've been taking ARBs for years straight. But some people who are sensitive to it do get high potassium levels. Now, but the only way to deal with this change in the heart is mainly to control water. The thing that I've always been scared of doing with excess growth hormone use, this might sound simple, but this is how people should think. Your body is increasing water retention for some reason. It's trying to do something. That thing may be pathologic in some way, but how much do you have to reduce the water content to remove that without being dehydrated in the kidneys to some degree? So you're caught between a rock and a hard place. So generally, I think it's, unless you want to be a bodybuilder, it's clearly better for you to do lower doses less frequently over time. That's clearly better for your health and for your gains, because you will get in the period of insulin resistance here. Let me finish this thought, because already it happens. There's no question it will happen in 10 days. It happens to bodybuilders even using insulin. Look at, and this I have to mention the name because you have to look at him. Look at Dave Palumbo. It's called Palumboism for a reason. He was using high amounts of growth hormone and insulin from his early 20s to his early 30s consistently, and with time off, of course, but still, and causing true insulin resistance. He, like Hidetada Yamagishi and other people, developed smaller arms as they aged. Hidetada, less extreme. You can see very extreme examples of this, even more than, no, not more than Palumbo, but similar to Palumbo, but with like synthol. These guys usually have synthol also because they abuse everything. But these people that used it for a very long time do get insulin resistance. Look at King Kamali, for example. No offense to King Kamali or to Hidetada Yamagishi, of course, but he also has, and he takes progress pictures without realizing it. And he was once asking a mutual friend of ours, how do I get rid of this gut? You're insulin resistant, bro. Anybody can help you with that knows anything about it. You should talk to somebody. You have clearly a distended abdomen with fat, subcutaneous fat, with liver fat at least. And then you have smaller arms than you did in your career, which is the reason why smaller legs develop in early adulthood is also, I mean, people in their 40s, is because of reduced muscle glycogen due to insulin resistance in the muscle, usually, or reduced glucose uptake also on the liver. It could be many things, but they have this. So even the long-term bodybuilding does it at high enough doses. So basically what I'm saying is it doesn't happen at infrequent doses.
We need to be testing our blood sugar during the mass blast and also our blood pressure as well.
Not really, because it's such a short time that it's not going to damage you much. The glycemic level in the blood is not going to damage you much, and the insulin level is not going to cause a heart attack or anything. And so you don't really have to measure it, except make sure it doesn't go too low. You can't, in fact,
well, low we can feel. High, sometimes people can't feel.
It might be even beneficial to have more sugar in the bloodstream for growth.
Well, the problem is if it's in the blood, it's not in the muscle.
Oh, I know exactly about that. So I'm talking about, though, managing it for health reasons. The only issue is the insulin resistance. The issue is the more times you do this, every time you hit your insulin resistance, you're getting more insulin resistance per gain. That's what I'm saying. Then the other way.
We kind of take our own insulin production out of the equation because of the massive amount of carbohydrates that we
Meaning
eat.
you
So
get
we're
even
replacing
more
it
insulin
with
resistance.
Insulin, yeah.
Even more insulin resistance because you're insulin resistant and you're trying to catch up with blood sugars and you're resistant. You're not going to catch up. It's going to keep getting worse.
The way we can test insulin resistance is how sensitive we are to a particular dosage of insulin also. So like if we lose our sensitivity
that's what the
dose.
oral glucose tolerance test is.
Yeah.
You just measure at certain times with a certain dose of insulin and compare it to the average. So you need to have that data available.
We found, I mean, I've done 100 mass blasts, so every one of them is a little bit different and it's improved over time. The protocol now is very different than it was 6 years ago.
I'll tell you something. My protocol is better, but my protocol is less frequent. So my protocol will deliver results not in time.
This is still a mass blast, but it's on a one like another approach is
not a mass blast.
1 day.
There's
per
no
week
blast
mass
in my thing. My thing is scientific. I don't use those words. So it's just the reason is it because of receptor sensitivity, which reduces over time, not metabolic pharmacokinetics usually, unless you're harming the liver, but just the receptors and they respond differently to different agonists. And slightly different receptors that do similar things respond differently. Let me give you an example. Gabapentin, pregabalin, and Valium, the diazepam. If you take if you take 3 of them a week, you will get far less resistance than if you take 3 benzos a week. And if you take 1 of them every 3 weeks and you're always on one weekend, you barely will never experience any resistance. So you could take a benzo every weekend for a year, and potentially, if you don't get addicted and tempted to try more than 1 day, you may be able to take it the whole year. If you take a benzo every day for 10 days, it's now half as effective. So this is now that's the GABA system, but systems are different. The androgen receptor may upregulate like the nicotinic cholinergic receptors in response to agonism, which I'll explain in a nicotinic cholinergic receptor video. I want to make one on this because there's some misunderstanding. It may upregulate, but what upregulating means people misunderstand. Doesn't mean you get more at a low dose. It means you get more at a high dose. It has more potential to respond to high doses. It doesn't mean the receptor is more active for response elements at the same dose. So it's mainly an issue of high dose. It may also be not downregulated from similar doses as much, but as again, there is some evidence of this in academic research. Dan Duchesne also subscribes to this, but my personal experience is the opposite. But it could be, as we found out recently, some androgens cause insulin resistance themselves. So I may have become androgen receptor related insulin resistant from higher doses, and that may have caused them to become ineffective in the long term.
So traditionally,
I don't know.
there was like.
But I was not using this approach that I'm talking about. I was 5 years ago, I was a normal lifter, lifting all the time and taking steroids most of the time, and I really like steroids. I experimented a lot with them, and I already knew quite a bit about it.